Welcome to the Walk Through Grief with Grace podcast, a space for human hearts to gather around stories of loss and love. I'm Jenn Cormier, your grief guide and host. It is my honor to have you join us through this sacred act of listening. May you receive something here that you need, something that is healing and calls forth your compassionate heart. We are so glad you're here. So, welcome to this episode. We have a roundtable, a really special, intimate roundtable today with three experts in the field of conscious dying. We have Jerry Grace, Gabby, and Constance, and I am going to just pass the mic directly to them to introduce themselves, to share their name and their background, and how they've come to this work in conscious dying. And we're just going to have a conversation that goes from there. So I'd love to pass it along. Would you like to share first, Gabby?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I feel honored to be in such a wonderful group filled with really good energy. My name is Gabby. I'm a hospice nurse, but I'm also an end-of-life doula and a conscious dying educator. And I'm an author. I have a Facebook following that's rather large, actually, 125,000 people. And it's mostly about educating about end of life. And then it sort of flows into grief because that's something we all feel and we've all experienced. And I'm realizing that because of this large number of people, that just indicates to me how many people want to know more, right? They want more information. They want to be able to feel more comfortable with this conversation about death and dying and grief and what all of that entails. So it's just kind of a cocktail of different conversations all about the end of life. And how did I get here? Well, it's a long story, so I'll give you the short version. I cared for a friend of mine who was dying. And as I was sitting at his bedside and helping feeding him and bathing him and watching the hospice team come in and the caregivers come in, I knew without any doubt in my mind that was something that I wanted to do. So at 40 something, I changed my whole life and I did this to intentionally work in end of life. So I'm where I'm supposed to be and I'm in very good company.
Thank you so much. And Gabby and I, we've done a podcast that you can check out a few episodes ago. Thank you so much for being here and for your time, all three of you. Yeah, can I pass the mic over to you, Jerry Grace? You just have to unmute yourself and then we can hear you.
Of course. Sure. I'm happy to share a little of my background. And thanks, Jenn. We've been on before together too. And it was great fun. So I appreciate being invited back. And my background, yeah, that I kind of came in the back door into death and dying. I was a body worker doing some, Traeger and body care, massage and Reiki. And the person whose home I was sharing Reiki, learning from her, she was a Reiki master, she died suddenly. And we had become dear friends by that point. And she left instructions for caring for her body at home instead of turning her over to a mortuary. And that experience of caring for her changed my life and completely, profoundly. So I suddenly had this hunger to learn a lot more about death and dying. And that was 29 years ago when she died. And so I was completely, well, it didn't overnight, but a year and a half later, I started on a new path of learning everything I could and about caring for people, but mostly post-death care. Natural death care is what we called it. And I started a nonprofit called Final Passages. And I've been doing that work for 27 years. And we did over time broaden our work into conscious dying, into end-of-life doula practice. And now I'm a certified medical aid in dying doula. And so my life has expanded in the work, and I teach courses on conscious dying and also on home funeral and green burial options. So that's me. And I've assisted probably nearly 500 families through family directed or family led home funerals.
Thank
Which
you.
has been thrilling and rich.
Thank you so much, Jerry Grace. And I didn't know what family directed home funerals were. I had become a interfaith earth-based minister, and I had started officiating weddings as sort of my main ceremonial offering. And I had a Buddhist nun who found me and said, "Have you ever thought about doing any work in end of life?" And I said, I have actually, my dad died at home and, had hospice care, and I had a real journey with his, with his healing through and with cancer and dying and, my grief journey. And I would love to do that. And she said, well, I know a woman who I should connect you with. Her name is Jerry Grace Lyons, and she has a conscious dying, death doula, green burial, home funeral, she has courses. And I called Jerry Grace right away, and she picked up, and she was in Hawaii, and she had a thing, and it was coming up, and I just jumped right in. So Jerry Grace is my teacher and mentor in conscious dying work. And she really opened the door for me in that way. So, and, it's one of the reasons why this podcast exists, I could say. So thank you for being here again, Jerry Grace, and for all the work that you do. And I just want to just extend my gratitude also to Constance, who is our third participant in this roundtable, who I don't know well, but Jerry Grace had sent me a message. I said, do you know any other, death doulas who might want to join us? And she sent me Constance's info and said, yeah, she's with me and works with me. And I, reach out, and it was last minute, and she jumped right in. So Constance, I'm really grateful to have you here. And this is the first time that we're really getting to know each other. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Thank you for being
here. Thank you, Jen. Well, I've been a birth midwife for more than 36 years. And I retired when my body didn't want to be up all night. And the nice thing about being an end-of-life doula or a home funeral guide, death midwife, is that it's not an emergency and it can wait till morning in most cases. I got to midwife my eldest and my youngest of 4 home birthed daughters, with the births of their 6 daughters at home. And that was a highlight of my midwifery career. And then I had the honor of midwifing my son by marriage through his final passage. And I took my mom off life support because she would have been in a vegetative state and would not have wanted that. So that had me straddling both thresholds. And when I realized I didn't want to be awakened in the middle of the night, and I didn't want the responsibility of life and death karma that we carry. In a hospital birth, there are many specialized people who play a role, but when you're a home birth midwife, you're the you're not really the pediatrician, but you're doing it all with your team. So I joined the core council of Final Passages. Oh, and when my son by marriage died, Jerry Grace helped us with paperwork, provided a cardboard coffin, and guided us how we could do as much as we could do on our own. And I've since helped her with a number of home funerals, and I love the intimate connection we have with people at such a tender time. And I write, I have a collection of grief and remembrance poems, and I'm often inspired to write a poem and then offer it to the people. That's me. And I'm a gardener. My life is all about life, life and death.
Yeah.
And one thing that's been really significant for me has been that death was not discussed in my family of origin. And that had me terrified. I would lay in bed at night and hold my breath and try to imagine being dead. But because I do this work, my grandchildren can discuss it with me. And my 10-year-old granddaughter said, Nana, how do you want to die? Do you want a home funeral? I mean, how many people have these conversations with their grandkids? You know, I feel like, yeah, of course. It's just been so healing for the matrilineal line. Thank you for having me, Jenn.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Constance. And I realized we did meet actually at one of Jerry Grace's trainings, and I remember that because I purchased your book of poems, which I take out and I read on occasion. So maybe there's a poem that wants to be read, you know, today. So yeah, thank you for your work. Thank you for your writing, and thank you for sharing, you know, how you got to this place. And I can see that, you know, maybe you can share a little bit about that sort of revolving door where people might say, oh, those are so different, you know, birth doula and death doula are so different. But when I speak to folks who are both birth and death doulas, they say, no, it's not actually that different. So I don't know if you want to speak about that.
Sure. For me, it's so similar because we're holding presence for what's sacred. And it's not about us. We're guiding people back to themselves. That for me, birth was about being midwifing women in labor, was about empowering them to have their autonomy and to drop in deeply with their inner resources. So many women haven't had a chance to access how powerful woman are. Women are. We are. And so in that way, it's holding presence and guiding people back to themselves.
And do you feel like that rings true at end of life too? That's
Oh yeah. Yeah. You don't get a baby, but you get a birth of a sort. You get a transition, and there's a release of the spirit and such incredible love outpouring.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe, you know, we could just put out the term, you know, conscious dying, because some folks have asked, like, well, what makes dying conscious? Like, isn't it always unconscious, right? You die, right? It isn't at the end of consciousness. So I'm curious if you want to just, if someone were to pose that question, well, what does that mean? You know, conscious dying. I'd love to hear your thoughts for anyone, you know, any of you.
Well, you know, it's a lot of things. It happens when we start living our lives more consciously. And that's just being more present to each moment as much as possible. It usually involves some kind of a meditative practice or some practice that brings us into our heart and helps us be more still so that we can be a good listener, receptive to what's going on. It can also involve being prepared with practical things. It's not just a spiritual practice or meditation, but it also means taking responsibility to take care of our own personal stuff. You know, what's going to happen when we die? What are we leaving behind to those who have to clean up the mess if we've left one? You know, have we gotten our paperwork together, our will in order, our you know, things, letting people know where what are our passwords for our computer? I mean, the simplest things can be part of a conscious living and dying process. But you know, it's being able to really face head on that we are going to die, which this culture doesn't like to do. It likes to hold death at arm's length, and it likes not to discuss it any more than we absolutely have to. So when we do look at straight on and we do make a plan for that, just as people create a birth plan, then we can create a death plan for those that are left with everything to do. And that's one of the greatest gifts I think we can leave our family or friends or whoever is in charge. So it might be as simple as letting somebody know what you want when you die, you know, if you want to be cremated or buried, but also if you want your body washed by your friends. And who do you want to be in the room? What does that room look like? Where would you most like to be? A lot of people just turn that over to family members, and that's okay. But when Carolyn died, my friend who died 29 years ago, it was so much easier. First of all, she died suddenly, so we were all in shock and grief. And trying to make those decisions of what to do would have been so much more difficult if we didn't have her plan. She had written out instructions for how she wanted to be cared for and by whom and where and all of that. So in our state of shock, we were able to just follow her plan. And that was just a huge gift, a huge legacy she left for us. So that's a part of conscious dying. There's so much more, but I'll turn that over to Gabby.
I found myself so like yes. I loved everything that you said. And like you said, Jen, you know, I think there's so many different ways of looking at what conscious death means, right? For me, it's a sense of awareness. For me, it's that person who is dying being very fully present during their experience by also expressing what their wishes are, right? How they want to be cared for, what's most important to them. But I've had 3 deaths in particular that I've watched them so fully aware, eyes open, almost communicating till that last breath. One was many years ago. It was my first medical aid and dying experience. It was back, and you probably know this, Jerry Grace, about when we used to do the capsules. Were you okay? So you
yes, I've watched movies anyway of them opening all the capsules.
Well, that's when it first started. It was the 99 capsules of medication that you would open each one sort of ceremonially, right? Like open it up, scrape it out until you got the pile. And that to me was ritual, because with each one I opened, I would say a prayer. And I remember us bringing the medications to her, and she was in her bed and she was a part of it. This was her choice. This was her right to make a decision on how she wanted to die, but to also leave her suffering behind. I believe that when someone has that awareness and that ability to make a decision and have it honored, there's something powerful about that. And so she did. She was suffering for a long time. So when we brought the medications to her, we sat down, she took the cup in her hand and she took a sip of it. And I was sitting on one side and the doctor was on the other. And I was right next to her and she kind of took it. She looks over at me and she goes, "I'm dying now." And I watched her just take that all in, right? Like she was aware, but there was so much peace because I knew that she knew she wouldn't be in pain anymore and that it was on her terms. And then I had another woman who chose not to have medication during her experience, right? She was very spiritual, not religious, very spiritual. And she was very, well, she was one of the most loveliest humans I've ever met. In fact, every person that was in our hospice house at the time was equally as drawn to her, just differently. There was something magical about her. And I remember as she was getting closer and closer to her time of death, we're all sitting around the bed and she would kind of wake up and she'd look at us and she'd smile at one of us and she kept saying, "Thank you. Thank you." And then she would look around the room again, she'd close her eyes and we'd just sit there thinking this was the time, right? Her breath would get a little more shallow, a little slower, a little slower. And then she'd open her eyes and she'd smile and she'd say, "Thank you. Thank you." And it was like she was able to do this on her terms in the most beautiful way. And then she just kind of closed her eyes and died. No medications, no outside influences, no one telling her how or what or why. This was all about her with the people she wanted there on her terms. And she died when she was ready. Right? She went through her process, and part of that was thanking all of us. And then she died in the most beautiful way. And then just recently, I was with a gentleman who was getting close. He died the next day, and I sat down with him, and he said, "Gabby, what's it going to be like when I die?" And I said, "Well, what do you think it's going to be like?" And he said, "Well, I mean, where am I going to go?" He didn't have a strong faith, but he wanted to know, because in order for him to be able to let go, he needed to have a sense of peace. And he was able to sit there with me and we talked about what it might feel like. And he helped sort of design where he was going, which was going to be beautiful. And there was going to be lots of greenery and lots of flowers. He was a gardener like you, Constance, and like me as well. And he loved to be around nature. So that's where he wanted to be. And so I sat with him and I had him close his eyes and I took him sort of on a journey, a meditation of sorts on the path of the place that he wanted to go. And we kind of did it together. So I said, "What do you see now?" And he described the trees. And he described the smell and the way the trees moved and the little bit of wind as it blew. And he could sense a little bit of ocean. He could smell it. He could hear it. And he was able to design this journey that he was going to go on. So that day, you know, I sat with him. I listened to him. I offered some support and guidance. And then I said, "Okay." I said, I wish you a beautiful journey and thank you for letting me care for you. And I hope it's everything you want it to be. His daughter walked me out. She said, "Gabby, he has not talked about his death this whole time. He has not said what he wanted. He has not given us any clues on how he wanted to be cared for because he wasn't ready to go yet." Now, the interesting thing about this is that he's a poet. And I think that maybe there was this part of him that was writing his poem, like trying to figure out how to really put it together. Well, he died that night. And I talked to his daughter the next day and she said, "Gabby, it's like he leaned back into his bed and he closed his eyes and he went on the journey that you helped him prepare. And he went on this on his terms when he was ready so peacefully." So for me, I think a conscious death is two things. It's having an awareness of what is happening with you, making peace with that, but also being able to design it in a way that honors your wishes so that when it happens, your wishes are being honored and perhaps your you're slowly writing each word to your poem until the last breath. And that is the poem, right? This beautiful poetic death. So I think it's about an awareness and choice and honor.
That's a beautiful story, Gabi. Thank you.
Very beautiful. Really poignant. Not all deaths happen that
No.
way, but then they can. And when they do, it's a legacy for everyone
Mhm.
left behind. Yeah. And it shows others the possibilities, that death doesn't always have to be something horrendous, feared,
Or dark or
or
scary.
or a failure.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a natural part of life.
And what a thought, right? The failure piece, because I know, having family that have died from cancer and cancer journeys, that sort of the medical system, right? We do everything to stay alive and to cure,
Yeah.
and that death is sort of considered a failure, right? For that. So I love in flipping that perspective and looking at, no, it's it's not a failure. We're all dying. It's a guarantee that we're going to die, but how can we bring awareness to it? How can we bring peace to it? And then how can we bring choice to it? I love those. It's so clear how you describe that, Gabby, and it can be poetic and beautiful, right? And I think that um, that maybe those are the components to a peaceful death, is some awareness, right? And some
Well, the learning can happen even, and spiritual growth can happen even in the final hours of someone's life. So healing, where we can be doing healing into death. And that can be with somebody in our life that we have conflict with or never healed from a relationship. There can be forgiveness that happens, and that can take a huge weight off their soul, so to speak, and allow a more gentle release. And so somebody isn't carrying that. And that's one of the roles, I believe, of a doula, end of life doula, is to really help somebody go on that discovery or exploration of if they're holding on to anything that's weighing them down, that's a burden to their soul, and helping them find a way possibly to resolve that or heal that before they go.
Well, it's one of the things I see most often as those last breaths are being taken, is the regret, the things that are the unfinished business, and as a doula, I so want to be at diagnosis, right? The moment that you hear this news, and if I could be with someone for 6 months or even longer and help choreograph things in such a way that when those last breaths are taken, they have let go, they have done some resolving, some healing, they've said the things, and that they can go on this journey without that baggage and weight that is so heavy. We should be allowed to have time to process forgiveness, and to let go of the things that weigh that heavy, that make us stumble and fall along the way. I want them to almost float, sort of mentally float. And it is all about that. You have to do the work, and if you can do it sooner instead of hours before that last breath is taken, you have a little more time to feel that freedom.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, because I work with many people going through a grief process after a loved one has died, and they talk so often about feeling weighted down, carrying around bricks, that feeling of weightedness. because I should have done this, or what if that, and there's this forgiveness that maybe didn't happen. So, I'm just making the connection here that if you are the one that's dying, if you do this conscious dying work of awareness and peace and planning and, all the things that you were mentioning, that it's a gift to yourself to be able to die in this peaceful way, but it's also a gift to your family that you've done that work.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was a huge light bulb moment in working with you, Jerry Grace, is sort of what you shared about Carolyn, right? That she described all of these pieces in detail. I want this person to wash my body. I want this clothing to be put on. I want these flowers. And just the specificity. And I think when we think, gosh, if I just say, well, I just want to be cremated or buried, or, I'll be buried and there's a cemetery. We think that, oh, I'm not a burden to my family because I'm not giving them too many things to do or whatever. Whereas what I learned from you is it's actually the opposite. The more specific you can be, it's a gift, because then your family has something, especially if it was a shock, like you said, to go on. Like, oh, okay, I can do this and this and this. And then there's not that, oh gosh, what did mom want? We don't know. Did she want it like this? Or what if we did the wrong thing? Or what if she would have wanted something else? So
Can prevent uh, a discussion between siblings, for instance, about and even getting into conflict about how to handle those various decisions. And so there was no conflict when it's all written down. Even her son, he thought maybe there should be an autopsy, and Norma, who was Carolyn's close friend, who was in charge of everything, sat down with him and showed him the piece of paper where Carolyn had written, I don't want an autopsy. I don't want to be embalmed. I don't want these things. And so she just said, do you think it would be a good thing to honor those wishes that your mom wrote on the paper? This in her handwriting. And so, she was happy. I mean, she was glad to have that document, because he was really upset about this. Of course, he should be, of a sudden death like that. But yet, he did honor, in the end, he honored her wishes. Mm-hmm. So it was helpful in that way. And yes, and it gave us lots to do in terms of, there was still a lot of creativity, just because Carolyn had written a lot of details about how to care for her. There was still a lot of opportunity for us to decide how to dress her and what makeup to put on her, and how to, just how to create the ceremony. And we knew she loved ceremony and ritual, but then we got to create that. We got to figure out what we wanted to say, or read poems, or play music, or sing, or play drums, or whatever it was. There was a lot of opportunity to do things. And now the families that we help have a lot of opportunity to decorate the room that person's in, or which they can do when they're living as well. And then after death as well. So it's good. People, that's part of the conscious dying too, is really knowing the person and paying attention to what helps them feel more comfortable and at ease through that dying process.
So. Thank you so much. Is there anything, Constance, that you want to add to, how you might define conscious dying?
Well, I think about medications, and there's so much pain relief required for so many people. And the tricky part is adjusting the meds so that they're able to be as present as they want to be and still be physically comfortable. That's what comes up for me. I'm doing some caregiving for a woman with Parkinson's, and she openly discusses the possibilities of taking the medicine because she doesn't want to suffer. And at the same time, her husband is, oh, he's very seriously ill, and some of the pain relief, he was on morphine and was hallucinating and wasn't himself. And then on top of that, a urinary tract infection for an elder, which can totally alter their mentation and their emotional response to things. You know, I'm getting to witness the fine tuning of the regimen for him. And it's so poignant, this particular situation. A couple that have been together for a very long time, will they end up taking the medicine together? You know? Yeah, that's just what's been bubbling up in my mind.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm wondering if any of you want to share, your thoughts on medical aid in dying, as a conscious dying act, if there's any other anything else that you want to share around that process.
I would be happy to. As you know, I'm a very big advocate. I think that there's definitely some difficulty from family members, when someone they love is choosing to do this. There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, there's such different opinions from so many people about what this means. But from my perspective and what I see is that I witness somebody who is suffering, somebody who is struggling with pain, physical, emotional, spiritual pain, and they're dying, and it's not on their terms, and it's not beautiful, and it's not comforting or calm or peaceful in any way. And so to be able to have this option to take these medications, they have to qualify. Of course, there's obviously the protocols and rules and stuff, and that is important to have in place. I think we have to stay that way. I understand that. And that's what also helps to reassure people the why, right? Why are they doing this, and how can they do this? Well, if they followed these steps, it was approved, they're appropriate. But then it gets down to actually taking it, and to have the family around to support it is so important to this person, because making that decision, it comes from a place of suffering and anticipatory suffering as well. And so to make that decision is brave, right? It's a very brave, courageous choice. And they're doing that. And that's a conscious choice. That's an awareness choice, right? That's a choice to honor themselves in all the ways that they deserve. But then to meet with resistance from the people that they love, because they don't get it. They want more time. They see this as maybe giving up or suicide, or taking more time from them when they already had so little left. And so it's hard to watch that. I see that often. But more than that, what I do see is the families embracing it, embracing the decisions, gathering around them, saying goodbye, and making those last moments, moments before they take the medications, and they get to say one more goodbye. And it's beautiful, and it's peaceful, and it's compassionate, and it's kind, and it's respectful. And to be able to get them all on board, to have the families say, yes, we support this so much, and we're so proud of you, and we're going to be right there. That's a gift. But it is very hard because sometimes you will meet with resistance, and I'll be with a family and almost everyone will be on board except for maybe one person. They can't be in the room because they don't approve. And my answer is always this. This is your last moment with them. You know, is there any chance you can put that aside to just be present? You don't have to agree. You don't have to support. You just need to love. It's not just for them, it's for you. You will never get this moment back, you know, and so that tends to work. You know, I can bring them back to the moment at hand and to what matters most of all, which is that you just say goodbye. I love you. Thank you. I'll miss you. I wish you a peaceful, beautiful journey. Thank you for being in my life. Goodbye.
Oh,
So beautiful. What a
Thank you
gift.
for that, Gabby. That's, yeah, it is truly an honor to walk beside someone who's that courageous. I don't, none of us know until that moment comes for us, whether we'll have the same courage. And my first experience was with a friend in Hawaii who had explored, gone down the whole cancer avenue journey, done all the medicine, done everything she could, and then realized there was really pretty much no going back. She was at the end, and she just didn't see a reason to draw it out further. And so I flew over there. She picked the date. It was in January. And in fact, it was January 24th, yesterday was the anniversary of 2020. So it's the third anniversary. And it was, I think that experience put me on the whole path of becoming an end-of-life maid doula. It was so beautiful. There were 16 of us in the room. We were all singing to her. The doctor was there. Doctor mixed the medicine. Myself and another close friend were on the bed supporting her. And all the other people were in a circle around the bed. We were all singing. And that was, they were no longer having to open all the pills, but there was more steps to it than there is now. But it was quite beautiful. She yeah, it tastes pretty terrible, the medicine. But she got now we know we can give things like sorbet or popsicle or something in between sips. And but she managed to get it down, and she was promised some kind of a candy after, candy drop of something in her mouth. And she went to sleep very quickly, but then we all kept singing. And then when we were chanting this one song, it was in a different language. It was in Hebrew. And the words in English meant breath or spirit. That was the chant she went out on, which was so perfect. And there was so many magical things that happened after her other close friend on the bed. Afterwards, when we were meditating, she said she was getting a message from our friend in this state. She had already died, and she was getting a message from her, though. And the message was that she felt she was in sludge, kind of a mud, like she couldn't move. And I thought about it, and I realized I had learned from conversations with my naturopath and other people that some of the medications, they're really hanging on, they're in the body, and they can affect the spirit bodies or our energy bodies around us. And so I asked her and another friend to do a ritual with me that we had done for my mom when she died. And that was for us to call in all of my friends' guides and angels and whoever she was spiritually connected to. And we asked them to come and assist us in lifting. And we literally used our hands and lifted energetically all the medications away from her body. And we just kept doing that and doing that for 5-10 minutes until it felt like the whole energy had shifted in her body and in the room. And that felt a lot better to us. The next day, her sister arrived because her body was still there in the room. And her sister arrived, and I had never met her sister. She arrived from Colorado, and she introduced herself to me. And the first thing she said was, Deanna, who is my friend, and her sister, Deanna came to me in the night, last night, about 8 hours after she had passed. And she was a spinning ball of light. And she said, she told me she was free. She was free, and it felt so great. She was so happy. And so I thought, oh, she's free, yay. And it was like confirmation. And then 2 days later, her other friend, her closest friend, not a sister, but her closest friend came back from Florida where her father had just died. And I didn't know her either. And she introduced herself to me, and she said she had been having conversations with Deanna on the other side. And she said, same thing. She's free, she's happy, she's, just filled with joy. So now I teach this ritual to my students as a way to be able to release their spirit bodies or their energy bodies, because it everything has a frequency, and we're just using that opportunity to lift away that frequency of the heavy medicines in the body. And it just felt good, felt right when I did it for my mom too. So anyway, it was a very big teaching for me. And it may not work for everybody. It may not apply to everybody, but you can even do it with your mind. You don't have to literally lift your hands. It just felt good to do that. But energetically, you can, ask the medications to be released from the body, because it's a lot of medicine. It's a big lot of medicine. It's a lot to, I could imagine why she felt like she was in sludge in mud. So anyway, that set me on a new path. I not immediately, but I was called from another spiritual teacher who was, I sat with for 5 years in meditation. And he called me one day and said, I have one of my students or devotees, I don't know what you would call her, but somebody who he worked with spiritually. She wants to take the medicine. And he knew with the work I was doing in death and dying. And he just said, do you think you would like to participate in helping her across? And then I found out about Akamade. And I had already connected with Lori, who's part of the Akamade, and she's our mentor. She's my mentor now for medical aid in dying. And she mentored me through that. And that was my first experience as a professional doing it. And then it just went from there. So I totally, Gabby, agree. It's such a beautiful thing to support people through choice, their own choice, to empower them and to try to bring their family on board the way you did was thank you for that. Just words that you can use to help bring people on the same page, into the same room, and having that opportunity to say goodbye. The best.
Mm. Wow, this conversation's been really inspiring for me and so rich. I feel like we could continue on for quite some time, but I know um, that we need to move on. So, before we close, is there any last piece that you want to leave listeners with? Maybe it's why someone might want to make a choice to have a home funeral, or medical aid in dying, or because one thing I'm taking away is conscious dying really has to do with awareness and choice. So, maybe you could, if there's a piece you want to leave listeners with, or a piece around a choice, that choice point, I'd love to hear any final word.
I'd be happy to start. I think for me, I'd like to give everyone a bit of an assignment. After you've heard us talk today, I want you to just sit down and write down 10 things, right? And think of the senses, what you hear, what you see, what you feel, what you smell, what you taste. Go from that direction. What songs do you want to be listening to? What do you want to be wearing? Where do you want to be? Who do you want there? Do you want juice or water? Do you want sorbet? Is there something that you want to smell? Think about that and just write it down. If you can't have the conversation with the people you love, at least live them just a little tidbit of your wishes, so that when that time comes, which it's going to come for all of us, that they have something to work with. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to make those decisions for someone else. We really don't. And how can we truly honor you if you don't tell us what you want? Of course I do, right? I have this huge folder of everything down to where I would like to be, who I want there, who I don't want there, that I don't want socks on, that I love roses, but I don't want them next to the bed because they're just too strong, that I don't want the light above my head turned on. Please have something over to the side, that I want my grandchildren there. I want them to say goodbye to me. These are all my wishes. I have a 12-hour playlist that is already, it's crazy. It's got Grateful Dead and Janis Joplin and Metallica and Push It by Salt and Pepper. I mean, I'm all over the place. Because when I die, I want to listen to all my favorite music, because it's sort of like a musical diary of my life. Music has always been really important in my life. And so I have it all down, because I know that as much as my family and friends love me, they wouldn't even know where to start. So today, to all of you listening, I ask that you just write this list down. Put it on your fridge. Make it a topic of conversation when someone, oh, Mom, really? This is on your fridge? Yes, honey. And by the way, I want a playlist, and this is who I want to listen to. And see if you can get that conversation started. And if you can't, at least you give them something to work with.
Wonderful. I love the invitation. Yeah. And I love the that's like a challenge,
Right?
Make a 12-hour playlist of your life, right? Metallica, Salt and Pepper, include it all.
And
I
Tom
love
Petty. There's a whole lot of Tom Petty in it.
Instead of, because I think otherwise it would just be that sort of, someone might play that massage music with the tinkling water, that makes you pee for the whole time.
Spa music. I think out of 10 people, there might be only one that wants spa music playing when they die.
Nobody wants spa music.
No one wants that.
I don't want spa music when I get a massage. I'm like, come on, I don't want this. So I love that you put that invitation on the table.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great if you can get somebody to videotape you at some point, telling some stories about your life. I have enjoyed so much watching my mom tell some of the stories. She told us in live, but we have them on film now. And I think some of the things that made us laugh, I think that, you know, you could write them. Certainly you could do some life review and write down some of the highlights and the lowlights and what you learned from those lowlights, right? Where that's part of our course, actually, and what you learn from them. And that's part of an ethical will that you can leave. That's part of your legacy, is being able, there's things I wished I had asked my mom after she left, you know, oh gosh, I never asked her about that. And how did she learn about that? And did she ever come to peace with, you know, did she ever get more patient? Did she ever, and if so, how did she do it? Because you can will somebody patience if you happen to be a lucky soul that has a lot of patience. Maybe you can leave that to a good friend who isn't so patient. Yeah, you know, death doesn't have to be somber and sad and morbid and, you know, dark. It can have a lot of humor and levity, and I think that's yeah, I mean, if you ask most people, you know, what would they like people to do at your memorial? You know, they probably would say, celebrate, celebrate, have a good time, drink up, you know, whatever. I mean, yes, cry too, you know, be real, be authentic, but live your life. Every moment is precious. None of us know when we're going to die. So, you know, yeah, as one of my students said, conscious dying invites us to live consciously with every breath we take. Yeah. Constance?
And in that way, it starts now, right?
I feel like I've got my homework. I need to put more on my playlist and do videotaping. That would be great. I still have a small record that my mom's father recorded for me when I was a little girl, and it was in a train station. And I don't have any device I can play it on, but I remember how I played it over and over when I was young, and it was, Connie, I love you. I love you. And I still have it somewhere, but just that kind of thing would be sweet to have some videotaping of stories. My husband started writing stories for our grandchildren from his adventures. Yep, I have a lot of old writing fragments that I've been typing up and filing, and that'll be part of my legacy. Yeah. But this has been so lovely. What an honor and a privilege to sit with all of you and share.
Yeah. Thank you so much for each and every one of you for your time, and may the listeners receive something they need. That's always my intention with this podcast. And I just want to say I'm walking away with inspiration to go live my moments more fully today and tomorrow and each day, because we live like we're going to live forever, but you know, we're not. So thank you for re-inspiring me to the re-remembrance that you know, tomorrow is not promised. So yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much.
Thank you for raising the energy. I feel it. It's very palpable, Jen. You know, thank you for bringing this to your listeners. And yeah, because it's about education, right? It's about hearing stories and realizing that there's so much more, even in our final days, hours. minutes.
And by hearing each one of us talk, right, you're reminded how different and unique we all are, which means that everyone out there is coming from a different perspective with different ideas and different opinions and different, curiosities. And how lovely it is to be able to just take this moment and put ours out there, right? But knowing that there's so much more. Like, this makes me want to talk to other people and ask them, what are you thinking about this? What do you think a conscious death is? And to really to get that conversation started and to hear what others have to say. I think that we need to spend a little more time listening to each other. And this is a good example of that. I loved hearing what you guys had to say. It filled me up.
Same.
That's actually our first exercise in our course, is asking people what they think conscious dying is, and then having a big discussion and having them journal and all of that. It's really exciting. It's open. I mean, I have pages of things people have said. Just wow.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll make a post in the Grief and Grace Facebook group, conscious dying is, and let the whole community chime in and
Yeah.
post that the day that this episode comes out. And we'll also post in the show notes, how folks can get a hold of each of you and the work that you do. So we'll put websites and links to Facebook groups and everything in the show notes. So
Thank
Thank
you.
you for putting us together. This was beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. This was fun. It was actually fun to do.
conscious dying.
Putting the fun
so
back in the word funeral, right?
Right. Oh, well, fantastic. I'm so glad that we can bring so much hope and lightness and joy into a conversation that has the word death in it, because like you said, Jerry Grace, death doesn't have to be always somber and dark. It can be humorous, and it can be light, and it can be so many things.
It can be a celebration of, I think of it as birthing into the next world. So there are those ready and waiting for the birthing of us, our souls or our spirits, into the next world. They're all excited. I can feel them dancing as somebody's preparing to leave their body.
Well, they call it a celebration of life for a reason, right? You've lived life, however long you were gifted it, celebrate that.
Yes.
Yeah. So in gratitude, in celebration, we'll close out our conversation for today, and we look forward to the next time we each meet. And bye for now.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Thank
Bye.
you.